Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneur's Inner Game podcast. This is a podcast where we talk to established, successful entrepreneurs and pick their brains to find out what is their inner game that's led to their success, to inspire you to think and do even bigger things. Today, we're joined by Joseph Gissy. He is a businessman, coach, an entrepreneur, an author focused on helping businesses learn sales and marketing techniques to help gain massive exposure through digital marketing and automated systems. Joseph works with financial advisors and small business owners to help build their prospecting pipelines and structure their marketing. He's also helping individual investors through his content to better understand the financial industry without all the jargon they get bombarded with. Joseph, a very warm welcome to the Entrepreneur's Inner Game podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I don't know a great deal about your history. We've only just met. So I'm really looking forward to finding out more about your inner game and how it's helped you to achieve all the success. But also we want to know about your failures as well. So please feel free to share, because there are lessons in failures as well as in successes.
Man, Nina, thank you. First off, thank you for that intro. Thank you for having me on your podcast and talk about setting me up and failures. Yeah, we'll get into those. There are a lot of good lessons. And this is weird, but I love failing because I do learn so much from doing it. But we can get back to that in a minute. Just a little bit about my background. I'll try to keep this a little brief on here, but I've always been an entrepreneur. Luckily for me, both my parents growing up, my father and my mother, have been entrepreneurs. My father has run a financial firm since 1986. I remember when he started in our basement with 2 filing cabinets and a piece of plywood and a telephone and a typewriter. So, that's what it was in 1986. He may have had a huge computer as well, but that took a little bit of time.
They were big in those days.
Yeah. But he was self-employed, picking up the phone, making phone calls. My mother's done other businesses, throughout her lifetime. I mean, I started selling, if people know Cutco knives, that was, multi-level marketing, whatever you want to call it. I did that for a while. There was one time in college where I used to play hockey and I just wanted a big screen TV and I wanted to go on spring break. So I ended up organizing hockey tournaments locally. So I would make money enough to go pay and do things. My earlier entrepreneurial activities always led to, I wanted to do something. So therefore, a way for me to earn more revenue outside of my minimum wage job was to do something else that would get enough money. Unfortunately, I never just kept doing those things because it was always kind of a means to an end. I got, I'll call it somewhat serious when I moved from my hometown out to California. It's funny because everybody that knew me thought I was moving out to California to be an actor. And although that was an interest, what I actually did when I moved out there is I started a production company. And back when MySpace was new, and I remember there were only about 40,000 people on MySpace at the time, I was opening up started a website that was a online community for actors, models, musicians, and a way for them to, start communicating and then finding auditions. And so I started building this company up with me and one partner. I was waking up at 4 a.m, posting ads on Craigslist, printing out flyers, putting them on people's cars. And I had about 4,000 people on my website at the time. And I ended up getting this cease and desist letter from one of the largest talent agencies that basically threatened to sue us because all kinds of different things. And I'm looking like, well, why? How can they sue me for this? And I ended up talking to a buddy of mine whose roommate happened to be a lawyer at the law firm that was doing it. And they said, well, they have a lot of money and you're a threat. And you're sleeping on your buddy's couch right now. So you can either try to fight this or you can close up shop. And, at the time I was, spending $5 a week eating, 99-cent ramen noodles because that's all I could afford. So there was no way I was going to even fight it. Ended up shutting that company down. But at least, I started learning, I was into kind of technology and into just businesses back then. Fast forward, I started working.
Can I just ask you, because you said that you love failing and there are lessons in failing. So what was the lesson that you learned from that? I'm not going to call it a failure because you started it, you got 4,000 people on your list. So obviously it was successful until someone came along and said, hang on a minute, you can't do that. But what was your lesson from that first venture?
Well, I probably would have just found a law firm to represent me, honestly, at this point, because I now know there are a ton of larger companies that do this when somebody's a threat. And it was literally me and one other person. I mean, I wish I didn't stop, because knowing now there are other websites that kept plugging along, and maybe they had funding, but here I was, a 24 or 25-year-old kid, and um, they succeeded and they ended up being massive companies. I just got scared and didn't know what else to do. And stability at that time was not really, when you're again when you're only spending a couple bucks a week because that's all you have to eat. It's a little intimidating, but there are firms out there that would help and represent you. I just didn't have the gumption to go out there and go do it at the time.
Got it. But please continue in your journey, your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. So I ended up getting a day job. I was working for Anheuser-Busch. I was running a sales route while I was doing all this stuff, and ended up working at Monster Energy for a while. And fast forwarding, the problem with me, I was always a great employee as far as I was a top salesperson. Always did really good at my job, because my philosophy was, even if I'm working for somebody else, I'm going to be their best darn employee. And I typically thrived. What ended up being the point of friction for me is I would always see a better angle on how to do things. And so working for another company always bothered me, or I never got along. I would get along with my manager or direct report or, supervisor up to a point. And then at some point it's like, all right, I got to start being more entrepreneurial in this position. Otherwise I am going to get bored and I'm going to want to do something else. So I just got to this point. I was being really successful, but at this time I was entertaining people in Hollywood, because I was living in Hollywood. That was my territory. I had to take, heads of different stores out, doing the nightlife thing. And when I ended up meeting my wife, I decided, like, I really need a change. I can't be, up at 5 a.m. doing sales kickoff calls and meetings, and then out till 3 a.m. taking people out to, show them a good time. Right. Like, I had to figure out, what could I do? And so that's when I actually called my father and said, hey, look, I don't know what you exactly do in the financial space, but I do know that you've always been around when we were kids for all of our soccer, hockey, baseball games. You took us to some vacations at least once a year. It seemed like you were always around. Like, what is it that you do? You've worked from home your whole life. Like, how do I start getting into that? And that's when I started getting into stock trading, and decided I wanted to become a financial advisor. And when I ended up leaving Monster, I ended up starting to consult and started to work for some other companies along the way, because I didn't have enough money to fully be an entrepreneur yet. But those were always, again, a means to an end. So I would work at a company. In the meantime, I'm building a book of business on the side as I'm becoming a financial advisor, and trying to work those two worlds until one kind of overtook the other. And we'll just fast forward to now. I ended up starting a new financial firm called Tactive back in 2021. We ended up being a kind of a fintech automated investor platform. We've done some revamps. And part of that was, I was just doing it for myself. I was just trying to build this company to just build my brand, and to automate and streamline the investment processes, make it easy for people to invest. And then that's when other advisors started saying, you know what, I really like what you're building. Can I have that? Can I join your company? And so next thing you know, we became a firm, started growing very rapidly over the last few years. We've won some industry awards because of that. So this whole journey, as that has gone on with Tactive, one thing that I kind of have taken a step back with, especially, and you and I talked about this right before we started this podcast. I took a step back a few months ago and really started thinking about, like, what makes me happy and what gets me the thrill of being an entrepreneur. It's tough when you start becoming corporate and you start having that corporate mentality, even when it's your own business. And so I really wanted to help my advisor partners that are working with me, and I really wanted to help individuals. So I got back on the train of, how do I maximize this helping them out? What is it they really need? With advisors, they're entrepreneurs too. They need help running their businesses, but they also need marketing help. And they're so far behind the curve when it comes to marketing in the industry, just because they're scared of compliance, or they're just too busy, whatever it is. They're just not they're not ahead of the curve. So I decided to pivot, start moving this new direction, started a business consulting, financial advisor consulting business called Gissy Ventures, literally in the last few months, and then started building that personal brand up. Things have started taking off with that left and right. And here I am today. So serial entrepreneur, lots of different things. There were some other ones along the way, but I was trying to make this as quick as I could for you.
No, that's great. Thank you. Really great journey and so much to dig into. You said that about being, you know, the happy entrepreneur, the thrill of being an entrepreneur. And this is something that is so easily lost along the entrepreneurial journey, because I imagine that just about everyone, when they start their own business, there's the thrill, the excitement of, for those who've left the corporate world, to think, okay, I'm going to be able to, you know, manage my time. I'll have a more flexible lifestyle, like all of those wonderful reasons to start a business. However, it can turn sour quite quickly, can't it? Because suddenly you're thinking, hang on, I mean, I'm working longer hours than I ever did in a job. I'm not getting paid as much. Income is unpredictable, to put it mildly. Things aren't happening how I thought they would. I'm feeling really jaded. I'm losing motivation, etc. So how have you kept the happiness and the thrill part of it going, you know, despite, you know, setbacks along the way and maybe things not moving as quickly as you wanted them to?
Yeah, I'm generally a very positive person, just overall. If I'm ever having a sad day, like it has to be it has to be some stuff that's building up. But you're right, there eventually things can take a toll on you, and you have to take a step back. For me personally, I'm an optimist. I see the world as, you know, I just literally talked about this morning. People were talking about the doom and gloom, the recession, the economy. I'm going, you know, this is the place where the opportunity proves the greatest for the people that see it, right? And this is where innovation happens. So I'm an optimist by nature, but when things get heavy and tough, and by all means they do here and there, I use the Calm app. I will go into a quiet place in my home. I will spend 15, 20 minutes, and I'll just pop it in my headphones, and I'll just kind of relax and zone out, and let it do its thing. And sometimes I just listen to a little bit of music. That helps me in very difficult situations, or like I just went through a really difficult meeting, or let's just say I have a tough decision I have to make. So that's the first thing. But realistically, for me, my positivity, I wake up every morning by 4:35 in the morning, and I hit my gym. And even if it's just walking or running or lifting weights or whatever, fitness to me is kind of that get away from everything. I don't look at emails in the morning, or I try not to. So I will, but I'll listen to motivational seminars, or I'll listen to motivational speeches in my headphones as I'm working out. And a lot of my creative ideas actually happen during that part of the morning. And I have a little dry erase board in my gym, and I write down ideas all the time. But I find that those endorphins from just working out and having positive stuff going into your ears while you're doing this for 30 minutes to an hour helps set the tone for the rest of the day. And it literally it just changes your, you know, this is a podcast on mindset, but it can change your mindset literally in a matter of just a day or two of doing this. And then you're having two benefits, right? You're having a benefit of your health and fitness and wellness. And then you're having a benefit of actually being positive and making better decisions in your day for your company and yourself. And you have that clarity where it's not clouded by all these negative emotions and negative subjects that are coming at you all the time.
Yeah, there's some great tips there on how to, you know, get out of the bad space and getting into a positive space. And you said, you know, you're lucky because you're a pretty positive person anyway, and that really shines through, you know, as I'm talking to you. When did you first get that inkling that your mindset was a key part of your success?
Oh, man, I'm wondering how cheesy I'm going to make this.
Oh, you can be as cheesy as you like. We like cheesy.
Okay. You know, well, here's a book that I read that actually changed my life. When I was in California and I was doing sales for Anheuser-Busch, I was actually in a pretty bad spot. And for some reason, my dad gave me this book. It's by Og Mandino, called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And when I first read the book, I didn't realize it was a motivational, positive help book. I thought it was a sales book, because that's what the title is, Greatest Salesman in the World. And it talks in parables and stuff. I read that book, and it has a principle that you're supposed to live by for 30 days for like the next 12 months. And the first one was, uh, gosh, now I'm blanking right as I'm on here. Well, my quote is, failure will never overtake me if my will to succeed is great enough. And I just kept repeating that mantra for 30 days. And then the second one was, oh, I will persist until I succeed. And I repeated that mantra. And I read these chapters because they told you to read the chapter morning, afternoon, and night. I did that for an entire year for 3 times a day, no matter what day of the week it was. And I found myself, I was like, this really, I found that I was doing better at my job as time progressed. I started connecting with people on a more personal level. Things started happening where, even tough people that I used to work with became easier to work with. I just started realizing that everything up here really needs to be well taken care of in order to have those deep relationships. And I'm one of those people that really likes to get to know people. Like, I'm really genuinely interested in getting to know somebody if we're ever going to work together or just do business together. That's just the person I am. But that book, I attribute a lot to what's going on today based on that book.
That's really interesting, because I bet a lot of people read that book and they didn't do what it was asked of them. They sort of read it and thought, yeah, I will keep reading it. And then day 3, they're forgotten all about the book. They've tried to find another book that's going to teach them what they need. But you did this for a whole year. You did exactly what the book asked you to do. And the cumulative effect, day after day, week after week, was that your mindset started going stronger and stronger. And therefore, more success started coming to you. It's absolutely logical. If you implement, you follow through, then you're likely to get a good result. So what is it about you and your thinking that meant that you implemented this? Whatever was happening in your day, you found time to do these affirmations, read that chapter that you were going to read that day. Why did you never skip it? What made you just keep doing it?
Well, the first quote, failure will never overtake me if my will to succeed is great enough. That stuck with me. It's like, I've always had this innate desire to succeed, and successes, and obviously everybody has a different level of success in their mind. And I've always had this vision ever since I was little of where I want to be in my life. And it's really interesting because whatever I do start putting up here and start visualizing eventually happens. And I've been impatient with that in the past, but I've realized that it does take time and it can happen to you. So that's been really powerful for me. But then the second part of that, the real first chapter, because the quote was the kind of like the pre to the chapters, but I will persist until I succeed. It's like, it seems so simple. Honestly, it really is. If you just put I call it consistency and some persistence into it, you can't fail. I mean, it's just, you may not be the best in the world at it, but you will eventually obtain some level of success. And so that's what sticks with me. And for me, like waking up when I was getting those people on my website, waking up at 4 a.m. just to post ads on Craigslist before I went to job for 10 hours, that was just par for the course. It's like, hey, I want to do this. I want to make this work. I have to do this. If I'm going to be successful, I have to do this. Failure is not an option. Right. And you know what? And that, to me, just because I've been through so many different businesses already, it's if one business doesn't really take off, that's fine. I'll find another. And then there's something else that will come along. We are such creative creatures that it's infinite possibilities for what you can do in this lifetime. You just have to, keep fine tuning until one really takes off for you.
Absolutely. And it seems so simple, and it is simple until we trip ourselves up and get in our own way, which means we overthink it and make it very complicated and very difficult. So it's that extra thinking we layer onto actions, which causes all the problem. So you said that you have an innate desire to succeed and you visualize and it happens. Can you share a little bit about your visualization process?
Yeah. So this wasn't Cutco. This was actually another, let me tell you this. I don't know if people like or don't like You can call them pyramid schemes or multi-level marketing, whatever. I took those experiences and learned a lot from them. One of the first books that they had me read, which was Think and Grow Rich. Tons of people have read that one by Napoleon Hill. And then they started having us do some exercises, and they said, what kind of car do you want to drive? What kind of income do you want? What's your life? And they actually had you write it down, and you built out a vision board. Right. And, I was back in high school when I first did that, but I again, thankful for that experience, and thankful that I was learning this at an early age. I've always built vision boards, whether or not I don't have, haven't really done it on like Pinterest or anything like that, which I might start now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it. But I've actually printed out things where I've seen the house I want. I've seen the type of, cars I want to drive, and, early on, what was the type of wife I'd eventually want to marry. And these things, I've, not that I've printed out pictures of all that, but I've visualized it in my head and realized that over time they've just checked off the list, and it may not be the exact house. There was one, I'll just tell you this quick story. There was one specific house in California that I even drove to the guy's house, talked to him and said, I'm going to buy your house one day. I was that guy. Unfortunately, and fortunately, it didn't work out, because then we moved to, an even a better place and a better location that were closer to family. And I'm so thankful that I didn't get the house, because it would have been a pain in the butt to keep up with. But at the same time, I try to strive to get to those things at some point, but I'm always, when I said I go to the Calm app and I'm listening to a meditation or just this one song that I listen to over and over again, I'm always thinking about where am I going, and what's going to happen in the future. And what, it's not necessarily just physical stuff. Sometimes it's just the capability of being able to have the time with my family. And that's one of my major drives, by the way, is just having a great relationship with my family, having time with them, and just being able to do what we want when we want to do it. And when it comes to work is just enjoyable, and we do what we love.
Wonderful. I love it. I really concur with your values around the family. In terms of your vision, for what you want, your goals, how do you keep those visions alive in your mind when, it takes time sometimes for these goals to materialize? And it's easy to think, oh, well, I visualized it, hasn't happened yet, it's not working, and then get into a feeling of, lack of belief in your goals. How do you keep those visions going?
Yeah, it's tough. I think if you're listening to this podcast and you've had you've visualized your life, if you take a step back and you start really thinking about, what you've actually achieved in your life, you've probably achieved a lot of your visions. You just haven't realized it. Now, it's not the vision of I wanted to win the lottery, or, I want this multi-million-dollar house, or, the Ferrari. Like, that can come if you do keep going down your path. But we're actually way more successful in our lives prior to us ever realizing we're successful. When I started taking a step back and saying, what, I have a good career. And this is back when I did work for, somebody else. I go, I have a good career. I have the health benefits, have the 401k. I had a great girlfriend who's now my wife. Like, things were great. I had, great coworkers, just enjoying life. That was really good. That was success, right? At that point in time. Now I wanted to keep going, but to think about that, you realize you have achieved some of your visions, you have achieved success, which means that if it's achievable and you've done that, then the other ones are achievable too. And it's just taken me time to realize it does take time. Nothing ever happens, overnight. And it's those little bitty steps along the way that, you're going to get to them eventually.
So true. And it is easy to fall into the rut of, oh, it's not going to happen. But as you said, think about what we have achieved, because we often look on the negative things. Haven't done that yet. That didn't work out. And we tend to focus on the negatives, but actually the positives are all there if we just turn our attention to them. And that can really boost us and build our confidence up. You mentioned drive a couple of times, and you're clearly driven. Where does your drive come from? And don't say, well, I was just born with it, I've already just had it, because that sounds okay when you've had it. But, for people who feel that they don't have that drive, talk to us about your drive and how you maintain it and keep it going.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that you're born with it or not, because actually my drive when I was in high school was not nearly what it is now. For me, I just wanted to play hockey, work at a hockey store, be a manager there, and live back in my hometown in St. Louis. There's nothing wrong with that. That was actually, a pretty cool, fun life, right? So my drive wasn't what it is today. When I went to college, I think that's when things started changing. Again, I did get involved with a couple multi-level marketing companies, a couple of them, which started having me read some of these other books. I believe that, and it's tough because you don't want to get stuck in this world where you're only reading self-help books and these great books just to get that high for a couple weeks or a couple days or whatever it takes you. But I do think it's important for you to keep educating yourself and keep learning and just have that thirst for something, because once you find something that you're interested in, makes the drive easier than it is. So I started reading these books. I started realizing I actually really enjoy, and around my office here, you can't see it, but I have bookshelves of books now. Never in high school, I was not a reader. Couldn't stand reading. I was probably the worst in my English classes and, comprehensive classes and things of that nature. But nowadays I can burn through a book that I find interesting, because I'm always interested in, like, what's the knowledge I can pull out of this? Like, what's the one or two key principles that's going to help me be more successful, with whatever I'm doing. And that keeps building upon itself. And again, you just have to find the book that speaks to you, that will start sparking that drive inside you. I think so. Maybe we are born with it, Nina. It's just that you have to find that spark, right? So for me, I found a couple books along the way that gave me some spark. Sometimes I'm reading a book, I get through half of it, I'm like, okay, the rest of the book, I actually understand what's going on, and I might just skim through and be like, okay, I'm done. But I did pull a good nugget here and there out of it. But you have to find that spark and then lean into it. So for me recently, it's leaning back into giving back to advisors, business owners. That spark for me that has me so excited right now is, okay, how do I share this with them? And how do I help them realize that there's a medium out there that they can achieve in, no matter what the odds are against them right now? And just start leaning into that spark, which will then drive you that direction.
Wonderful. That's so good. I love that. So far, because, we don't know what's going to be happening later in life, but so far, what would you say is the biggest lesson that life has taught you?
Actually, this is one I'm always working on, but it's the empathy one. And my wife points this out for me too. Because I didn't, I've had to develop that skill a little bit more, because I've been actually more focused on me than on others, and realizing that there are more people out there that are just struggling and having a hard time. And especially, I come from the financial space. I come from that entrepreneurial background, and I'm realizing those two worlds are colliding. And a lot of times they're just lost. They're just trying to find an answer of how can they grow their business. And they're actually in a good spot where they want to help people. And sometimes there's some really good advisors and really good people out there, but they just don't know how to get that message across. So, but it's having that empathy for what they're doing and where they're at with their lives, and realizing that, hey, they need a little bit of help. So that's been one of the biggest lessons for me, is just taking a step back and realizing that you need to have empathy for others. Because that was one I had to work on for myself. I was just so focused on Joe for so many years. I didn't get as far in life focusing on, this is going to sound weird, focusing on Joe. When I started focusing on the others, it changes. It's different.
Yeah, it really is. I know exactly where you're coming from. So you obviously, you've grown businesses, you've had all that success. What's a top tip you can share with our audience, who are all entrepreneurs, of how they can grow their business? What's one thing they could think about or start implementing that would make a difference to them?
Here in 2023, social, digital. We have never been in, this is where I'm going with this. And there's some really great people on social talking about this too. And they've been talking about it forever. I wish I would have kept doing what I was doing back in 2006 with that original production company, and just kept up with it. I stepped off social. I was actually off Facebook for over 10 years because I actually saw things when I was employed. I said, this is going to get people in trouble, and I don't want people that I'm working with see what what I'm doing in my personal life, and I got off social. But today, the one thing they need to learn how to do is social media, digital marketing. And you can do it for so cheap. It's free. You just get on the platform and you just start talking and learn a ton about it. But that's what I would tell them to do as an entrepreneur. And that's the one thing they can do to help grow their business organically, because it's cheap. Lots of eyeballs are there. And it's the one medium that's the great equalizer against you and the big brands. And you may think, I'll say this one more time too, or one point. You may think that if you implement your idea, that all of a sudden the big brand's just going to see it, take it, and start running with it. But you have time because you are an entrepreneur and you are a small business. The bigger the brand, the harder it takes to turn that ship around and even try doing what you're doing. You'll be so far ahead at that point, it won't matter. So just go at it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Social media, start talking, building relationships. As you said, it's a great equalizer. And yeah, obviously have a great strategy in place and then implement like mad. Joseph, thank you. It's been amazing. How can our listeners and viewers find out about you and the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, josephgissy.com. I made it really easy. Go to my website. I've started a couple podcasts myself. I have all my social media handles on there. There's a way to connect with me. If you are a small business owner, you are a financial advisor, you can literally connect with me. I'm actually started to do webinars where I'll start doing Q&As, giving people hints and tips and all that fun stuff. I wrote a book called Dominate Digital, a how-to guide for financial advisors. You can buy that off there. Everything's going through josephgissy.com. And the last piece of advice is make yourself a brand. And that's what I've done with josephgissy.com. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And for everyone who's been watching and listening, I hope you've got huge nuggets of gold from our conversation today. Thank you for joining us. Until next time. Bye-bye for now.
Yeah, thanks, Nina.